I'd like to begin by asking you to imagine how this world is going to look like for your children and grandchildren. Try to think, will the security environment of the future make this planet a more peaceful place to live in? I'm about to offer you a brief probe into the future of international security, trying to assess what is likely to happen already in our lifetime and perhaps also for generations to come. This is not a fortune telling, and as you can see, I don't have a crystal ball, but I do have this bottle of water. By the time our future kids will have their future children, the planet, our world, will be an even more complicated place to understand. The things that affect and shape security will change. But not to worry, nuclear weapons, terrorism, and the rest of the familiar challenges of the day will also trouble people in the future. Unfortunately, it's not going to disappear. But today, I'd like to focus on two critical issues that will be overwhelmingly important in the future: space and climate change. Now, we may often think about it, but not necessarily often in the context of security. But I think that we should, because these two issues will be overwhelmingly important and significant in the future. Already today, our security is heavily dependent on space capabilities, namely satellites, our ability to launch them into orbit and to make sure that they work okay. Satellites, if you think about it, have changed everything that we do here on our planet, from air and maritime traffic control to using our cell phones, watching television, intelligence collection, communication, and much more. Our military dependency on satellites will grow even further in the future. Future warfare will be even more dependent on satellites than it already is. I didn't mention our ability to integrate forces on land and sea, operating in multiple dimensions. Our ability to maintain our cybersecurity is not less important, because satellites form a critical part of the physical infrastructure in which much of the virtual activity takes place in, the connection between the virtual dimension and the physical dimension. Now start playing with this idea. Look at how much data is running through satellites, how they affect our lives. And if you have some devious thoughts and you get to manage to mess up with satellites on space, you can cause quite a lot of damage here on Earth. Damage might be caused not only through cyber means, but also through physical means, namely referred as anti-satellite attacks. The idea of firing a missile into space to intercept a satellite is not new and surely not popular. But in 2007, China successfully intercepted one of its own satellites, sending into space thousands of metal and plastic pieces hovering in orbit, threatening to collide with other satellites, potentially interfering with things that happen again here on Earth. Already now, there are dozens of thousands of metal pieces, fragments hovering in orbit, threatening to collide with other satellites, potentially also interfering with space flight. And the damage that could be caused to things that we do here on Earth is again quite clear. As I said, using our smartphones, everyday technology that we may not even think about that is connected to satellites. It is best described in a US report on national security for space strategy as becoming more congested, contested, and competitive. Let's focus on the competitive for a brief moment. Before the end of this decade, we will see pretty amazing developments in space. For example, with space flight. Well, NASA has put to sleep its space shuttle program to focus on more advanced, futuristic spaceflight vehicles, perhaps flying into Mars in the next decades. The private sector is already making progress. For example, Virgin Galactic is a pioneer, working to make space flights more affordable, perhaps for space tourism, and also for space research missions. And in the UK, engineers are already working on testing new engine for futuristic space planes, not even space shuttles on rockets. Furthermore, we will see future assets deployed in space. These inflatable space habitats will be deployed high above our heads, forming large space stations. And at the same time, we have to think about China, that is making quite ambitious plans for the moon. There's a talk about China is planning a manned moon mission And also there's a talk about the possibility of establishing a Chinese moon station. And the relative opacity around the Chinese space program makes some people in the West concerned. And there's even a talk about the possibility of a Chinese annexation of parts of the moon, bizarre as it may sound. And there's also ambitious commercial initiatives to harvest minerals on asteroids. Now, look at all these amazing futuristic ideas and impressive technological achievements. And now think about this. Historically, every technology invented by the mankind was at some point used in the battlefield. Will we see the same thing happening in space? Having that in mind, I think we should start asking ourselves the following questions. If more government and private assets are to be deployed in space, will it not open the door, and if governments will threaten each other's assets, as humans often do, will it not open the door for some kind of space aggression? And in turn, will it not invite some kind of space defense? And if countries will not respect the existing space treaty that meant to guarantee the peaceful use of outer space, will we see some space-to-space warfare, or indeed space-to-Earth warfare? Let's return to Earth. At the same time, humans will be flying high into space, flying to Mars perhaps, or on the ground, on our beloved planet. Humanity will be struggling for the very basics: energy, food, and water. Today, climate change increasingly affects this international security discourse, but still not to the sufficient degree. Perhaps because of the political charge the issue bears with it. But I think we must pay more attention to climate change, particularly to water security. Across the globe, water security is already a problem, and it is expected to increase in the next decade in a growing number of countries, in a growing number of parts of the world. A US intelligence assessment on water security issued earlier in 2012 says that shortages, poor quality, or floods will risk instability and state failure, increase regional tensions. Now, this illustration from the report makes the point quite clear, I think. This is the world today. In blue, we can find areas that has low water stress levels, in green, dry areas, and the more orange and red you get, the higher is the water stress level. Now, look at the world in 2025, much more red. Areas that were once blue, with almost no water stress, are expected to turn much drier and quite unpleasant. What does that mean? Well, if this estimate is correct, then less water means less crops, less food, and bluntly putting it, less water means less life. Security-wise, less water will aggravate already existing tensions and problems. Less developed countries will be less equipped to cope with such emergencies. And fragile states might become failed states, hence the assessment in the report. Now, states' failure opened the door for all sorts of radicalism, whether local or transnational. International terrorism might become a very serious problem. The local, domestic, and global implications could be dramatic. This is a critical destabilizing factor that we might see evolving. And the potential could be a humanitarian catastrophe or at least a major security problem, or indeed both. The importance and complexity of these two examples that I've shown to you, space and water, can teach us an important lesson. We have to develop a much more holistic view on security, taking into account many more dynamic factors, looking beyond the traditional prisms. Not just connecting different issues with clear and almost obvious linkage to security, but also understanding the security implications of additional factors, and also recognizing the impact of a few paradoxes on our future. People across the world will be faced with both old and new security challenges in space and here on Earth. We will have revolutionary technologies in space, flying higher and faster, utilizing space resources. But at the same time, here on Earth, we'll be struggling with much more basic, even primitive problems here on Earth. There will be a greater dependency between the dimensions we operate in, between space, air, land, and sea, both in the civilian and in the military world. And so the traditional clear distinction between what is military and what is civilian, between what is environmental and security, will be much more blurred, between local and global. And perhaps, if we look much deeper into the future, and indeed much deeper into space, we will have to start talking not just in terms of international security, but also in terms of interplanetary security, or even the security of our galaxy. And I know this is where it might start sounding like Star Trek, but not because of aliens or something like that, but because what the mankind might do to itself. Until then, humans will be faced with three conflicting paradoxes: prosperity on security, prosperity, necessity, and austerity. Humanity will be so advanced, celebrating great technological achievements in every field, flying higher and faster, but at the same time, with more progress and assets deployed in space, and with more climate change-related problems on Earth, the security needs will grow as well. But we don't necessarily have enough money to pay for it. Overstretched and almost collapsed economies simply won't have enough money to pay for their growing security needs. Let's think what we can do about it. We have to rethink the way we think about security. It has numerous implications, much more than the time we have here tonight. But we also must raise awareness for the importance and implication of space and water on our global security. Perhaps the most important lesson is that we will have to act collectively to ensure the peaceful use of outer space, to prepare collectively for severe water shortages and increasing desertification. As we have seen, the projection is not so rosy. The nature and present of the security challenges that we see here on Earth and in space requires a collective, coordinated global response to avoid the militarization of outer space, to share water technology solutions now in order to save lives in the future, to prevent what may be a very unstable international security environment. People and governments, friends and even foes will have to work together to rise above the typical divides, to diffuse the uncertainty, and to ensure the very existence of life on this planet. Thank you.